going to look at how to use the quadratic formula for algebra. And the formula itself that they give you here, that formula is on the reference sheet on the regions. So it can be used when you're trying to find solutions for something that really isn't factorable. And we're going to look at three examples. We're going to look at just a basic example where we're going to get some whole numbers out. And we're also going to look at an example where we might get a radical. And we're going to look at a word problem example. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to look at exercise 3 on the bottom of this page. And I'm going to take you through the steps that you need to do to get a solution with the quadratic formula. So for exercise 3, we're not going to do the factoring portion right now. We're going to go right into the formula. So the first thing you want to do is write down what the values for A, B, and C are in the quadratic equation. So A is 2, because that's the number in front of the x squared. B is -9, and make sure you pay attention for the signs, and then C is 4. So the formula itself, you can kind of see it right here on the top of the next page. What we're going to do is we're going to take out all the A, B, and C values, and we're going to substitute the numbers in that we have. So first step I'm going to do is I'm just going to substitute. So I got negative B, so I have a negative sign, and then I have B, which in this case is -9, and then a plus or minus, and we'll talk about what that means near the end. And after that we have B squared, so I have -9 squared outside minus 4, and then A, which is 2, and C, which is 4. And then that's all over 2A, so it's 2, and then in parentheses next to it would be a 2. So you'll notice that every time I saw a letter, I put the number in parentheses in that spot. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to simplify each of the three parts. Now, the first part, before the plus minus sign, is easy. That's just going to be 9, because we have a double negative. The bottom part is easy as well. 2 times 2 is 4. And then the part in the parentheses we'll use the calculator for. So I'm going to take my calculator out, and I'm going to type in those numbers underneath the radical sign. So we got -9 squared minus 4 parentheses 2, and then another parenthesis with a 4 next to it. So we get 49 in this case. So we got 9 plus or minus 49 divided by 4. Now for this example, they're all whole numbers. And the reason why there's that plus minus is there's actually two answers, like we've seen a lot of times with quadratic functions. So there's two possible answers for this. There's the first one, which is 9 plus, don't forget my radical 49 over 4. And then there's a second one, which is 9 minus radical 49 over 4. Now, radical 49 does have a whole number that it's equal to. So I'm going to take those. I'll have to rewrite that part again. And you're thinking to yourself, hey, the radical for 49 is 7. So we have 9 plus 7 over 4 and 9 minus 7 over 4. And we can use that fraction option. And if you do 9 plus 7 over 4, that gives you the first solution, which is 4. And then 9 minus 7. So I'm going to do second enter to pull up the equation. Switch that plus to a minus. And we get 1/2. That would be our second answer. So there are two roots for this question. They are 4 and 1/2. And in the case of this example, well, our radical, the part under here, this part, ended up equaling a whole number. But that won't always be the case, as we're going to see in the next couple examples. So if you go to the next page, we're going to take a look at exercise 4B together. And again, we're not going to do A, so if you want to use this whole area for work, you can. So I'm going to do the first thing I talked about last time. I'm going to write down what A, B, and C are. So A is 3, B is 4, and C is -1. Then I'm going to go ahead and substitute them into the formula. So I got negative, and then in the parentheses 4, plus or minus 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1. And that's going to be all over 2 times 3. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify the 3 parts. So I got negative 4. I have 6 in the bottom. I can't forget my plus minus. And then I'm going to go ahead to my calculator again and type in that part under the square root. So I got 4 squared minus 4, parentheses 3, parentheses negative 1. So in that case, I get the square root of 28. Now, the square root of 28 does not have a whole number. So they want us to do what's called simplest radical form. So they want us to try to break down that radical into something smaller. Now, what you want to think about as you're trying to factor it, break it down, is you're trying to think of those numbers that are the radicals that give you square roots. So I'm writing down the first 10 of them. So, for example, 3 squared is 9, 6 squared is 36. Those are the squares that I'm thinking about. Now, I got to figure out the highest one of these that goes into 28. And in this case, really the only one that goes into it is 4. So what I'm going to do is take that radical 28, and I'm going to write it as a product of those two smaller radicals, 4 and 7. Now, radical 4 is 2, so when I rewrite this, I got negative 4 plus or minus 2 radical 7 over 6. And to finish simplifying it, because it's a fraction, I can look at the whole numbers and I can divide all those whole numbers by 2. So I end up with this as an answer, negative 2 plus or minus 1 radical 7 over 3. So again, those are the two solutions. It's negative 2 plus 1 radical 7 over 3, and negative 2 minus 1 radical 7 over 3. Now, the last one we're going to look at is exercise 5. And they want us to find, in this graph, they want us to find when the ball hits the ground. So it says, using your calculator, sketch a graph of the projectile using the window. At what time does the ball hit the ground? And then it says use the quadratic formula to the nearest tenth of a second. So I'm going to go ahead first and toss in that graph. We got negative 16x squared plus 20x plus 60. Make sure you include that negative at the beginning. I'm going to go to the table. Looks like we got 0.60. So we got 0.60 here. And then we got 164. So that goes up a little bit. And then we got 236. So let's say 36 will be about here. And then at 3 it gets to negative. So that means it's going to go up and down and then hit somewhere in this area here between 2 and 3. So we need to figure out what that is to the nearest tenth. And I'm going to use the quadratic formula to help me do that. So you'll see, again, I'm going to put in the numbers for A, B, and C, negative 16, 20, and 60. I'm going to go back to the formula. We got negative parentheses 20 plus or minus, and then we got 20 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 60. And that's going to be all over 2 times negative 16. So I'm going to reduce those parts, negative 20, negative 32. And let's get that down to 1 square root. So we got 20 squared minus 4 times negative 16 and 60. So that's 4240. So we got the square root of 4240. Now I got to figure out which one of these is going to give me a whole number, or a number that's between 2 and 3. So I'm going to put those two in the calculator right now. do alpha y equals for a fraction. So I got negative 20 plus radical 4240 over negative 32. And that one gives me an answer of negative 1.4. Well, that's not it, because I had to get something between 2 and 3. So I'm going to do negative 20 minus. I got to clear that out, forgot my fraction. Actually, let's do this. Let's just do second enter. And I'll just go back up and change it to a minus sign. And this one should give us our answer. So you'll notice that answer is 2.65. That's about when it hits the ground, 2.65 seconds. So in the case of the rounding, it's 2.7 would be the nearest tenth. And I'm going to put seconds because that's the measurement. So that's how you would look at one of those graphing questions. And again, make sure you round it correctly, because if you don't round it correctly, then you would lose a point for it.